clay, and we're going to make a flat bottom platter with a nice wide rim on it. And the bad news is you still have to center the clay, even for a platter. So we do a little patty caking and then we're off to the races here. When I'm centering a larger piece of clay, I tend to focus on the bottom 1 inch first, making sure that that is sealed to the bat. So I'm leaning in and doing a really large grip with my fingertips. Once I have it fairly well sealed to the bat and this area is slightly undercut, then I proceed with coning up. So I'm going to press in from both of my palms to bring the clay up. I'll do that a couple of times. Coning up really helps to center the clay well because you're getting the clay spread out into smaller bits that your hands can really get a grip on. So as I bring the clay down, I want to lean the clay over, not a lot, just enough that I have a little bit of action on the clay. It's aligning the particles. As I get about halfway down, making sure not to mushroom over this top, I'm going to spread my fingers wider, double up my side pressure, and get back into a regular centering position. The click, click, click you hear is the bat sliding around a little bit. That's always fun. Now I'm going to finish up the centering, bring it up to full speed, and then we're about to bring this down further and start making a platter. So before I actually bring the clay down much further, I usually clean the bat. Since you're going to be spreading the clay wider over the bat, it's good to have a clean surface, no goop. You can get rid of the goop. And then once this is clean and you're sure your bat is nice and flat, you're ready to go. So I'm at a low to medium speed. To bring the clay lower and wider, and our goal is to get it down to about maybe 1.5 inches thickness across the bat before we open it up. I'm going to use my top hand and have more pressure from the top than from the side. But I still have pressure from the side because as I bring the clay down, I want it to stay on center. So I'm going to use my right hand to make an indentation in the clay. And that new lower height needs to be moved from the center to the edge. And then my outside hand, my left hand, is going to do a little bit of centering on the edge as I bring it down. And I keep doing that, so I'll start again at the center, make my indentation with my dominant hand, add a little water since it might be sticky, and then slowly bring that towards 6 o'clock. You can see a little air bubble in there in the clay. People always ask, what do you do with air bubbles? What am I going to do? And my usual advice is, well, ignore it, and then in the normal course of making whatever you're making, hopefully it pops because you're putting enough pressure on the clay. So I'm going to ignore it for now and proceed with opening up the platter. So to do a flat bottom platter, I'm going to hold onto the sponge with 2 hands and make my well, and hopefully we'll hear this air bubble pop. Or at least it's moving. There it goes. Make a nice deep well. That's quite an air bubble. There we go. Continuing on, to actually press this clay out wider, once I have the deep well made with the 2 hands on the sponge, I'm going to lean along this interior wall and push the clay out wider and flatten out the bottom, leaving a nice ring of clay. So here's how it goes. Line it up and press really hard and move from the center toward 3 o'clock. Before I actually lift the walls, I'm going to spend a fair bit of time compressing now along the bottom and making sure that not only is the bottom flat, but I've spent enough time compressing that I'm going to avoid an S-crack. So I would recommend using a nice hard, either rubber rib or a wooden rib. I usually use the curved side, and you don't want to go at a steep angle to the pot, or sorry, at a perpendicular to the pot. You want to go at a very steep angle so that the rib runs nice and smooth across the surface. If you need water, you get some water in there. And I usually spend a minute or so going back and forth to really compress that.
What if it were off-center at this point?
What's that?
What if it were off-center at this point?
If the clay is off-center at this point, and mine's not perfect by any means, before raising up the wall, I come in and I'm going to use a sort of a all-over grip on this ring of clay to recenter the edge. So I start with my left thumb, pushing in on the outside. I'll use my fingertips on my left hand to squeeze a ring, and then my right hand compresses down and applies moisture, and I recenter this ring. Now I'm ready to lift the wall. So for a wide rim platter, it might seem counterintuitive, but you want to lift almost all of the clay up and have it be mostly vertical to start before it gets laid over. So I'll start at 3 o'clock, line up to do my pull, and bring the clay up. I don't want the rim to get too thin because this is the part that's going to get folded all the way out and over, so it has to start a little bit thicker so you maintain a good thickness on it. And do another pull. Press the rim. So on yours, if you're making this at home or in your studio, at this point I usually recommend that the wall get dried out. So if you throw fairly quickly, you don't have to do that step. You can just sort of rib it smooth and dry it off. But depending on how long it takes you to get to this shape before you make the platter, you may want to dry out the wall before doing some extreme shaping. So what I'm going to do is just compress my wall with the rib, and then I'll go ahead and shape it. So I'm using a wooden rib now, held at a slight angle, and I'm running my fingertips up the inside of this to take the slurry off. And then I'm going to shape mostly from the inside to flatten this out. So any kind of flat wooden rib or mostly flat rubber rib will do the job. To get this laid out, we're going to start at the top edge, keep your hand on the side for support, and start pushing this rim wider. Let it stretch, and then run the rib down the interior wall to stretch it wider. We'll take it in steps. So that was our first pass. Now it looks like a big open pasta dish maybe. To get it further toward platter, we'll go again. This time I'm going to switch ribs. Let's try this guy. So I'm switching to one that's curved. I'm still going to start with the top edge, pushing it down and wider. And then I'm going to slide this rib downward and inward to flatten and get more toward our big open wide platter shape. Okay, so we're almost there. Still going. Now's a good time to do any final compression if you need to. Smooth out the interior. And then I'll flatten one more time. If your clay is really floppy or wet, this is where you could be hair drying first, drying out the exterior along the outside, also a little bit on the inside. I'm also slowing the wheel down. As this gets wider, you have to be working more and more slowly. Compress the lip. And now I'm going to add some details in here, right where the brim of the platter meets the bottom. It can be nice to have a real defined edge. So there's one, and then a second one was just the clean corner of a tool. So maybe the corner of this rib, and we'll put it right in there. And then we'll clean up any clay goobers on it. And the inside can either be plain, or you might think about adding a small spiral to finish it off. You can use the rounded edge of a rib, and that would look something like this. I usually go from outside to the inside, just run it on in. And that's it. There you have a flat bottom platter with a very wide rim.
How are you going to glaze it?
How am I going to glaze it? I would look to do something high contrast maybe, so doing the inside with Temku, and maybe the rim of the platter with Wright's green, something like that. So you get a nice subtle foresty green. And then you can also contrast from satin matte on the rim to a sort of silky, glossy black pool in the middle.
Like the Mashiko kind of.
Yeah.